Welcome to Liquid Bliss Worldwide. I'm Dominic Flores here with
Sakash.
Yes. And today we have, we did cards?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. So today we're going to talk to John Bunzl.
John Bunzl, author of The SIMPOL Solution, which is...
SIMPOL, S-I-M-P-O-L.
Yes, S-I-M-P-O-L.
SIMPOL Solution.
Which stands for Simultaneous Policy.
Yes.
So what that means is if we're trying to solve a global problem, we really need people to come together simultaneously and agree to something. And that sounds really hard, but he shows why it's not as hard as maybe we think and how we can get there. And we have a really good conversation talking about consciousness. I feel like I geeked out a little bit with him.
No, you were great
on this. And
I came at it from a layman's perspective. So I felt like watching you two explain it to me, I felt like I give a certain aspect of listeners a voice of like, hey, what do you guys...
Did we sound optimistic or pessimistic?
You sounded very optimistic. I felt like I was pessimistic, but it's more, I just kind of want to understand how this could possibly happen. His idea of simultaneous change. Because in politics.
We need it to happen faster than things are happening right now.
So there's a nice chunk of conversation about how AI might make that faster.
We're hopeful. And I enjoyed a conversation with he and I talking about our AI CMO, which is, you can find out more about at aicmo.io, which is this business software.
Wait. aicmo.io. I like that.
Where this is this business software that tries to help solve some of the business consciousness solution. And John's coming also at it from the other side of the regulation side of things, how to solve the regulation problems with business and bring these two together. So,
yeah, because you guys, it was the first time I saw two very similar visionary ideas talking, and how I could start seeing how things couple up and matter. You didn't mention the URL. You got to do better. So thank you for mentioning it right now. You got to do better in the future.
Yeah,
we got to believe. Yeah, we got to get out there. We got to do the media training. So this is a great conversation with John, who we met through Dr. Irvin Laszlo. And then should there anything more we need to even say, or should we just jump into meeting John?
If you're interested in, and if you're feeling frustrated about like the global situation,
the
future, it's worth diving into this because here's how we can get through this together. Here's how we can find solution, and something that each of us can do individually, which is very frustrating for people. It's like, what can I possibly do?
Well, it's something that I normally would sound like a lip service, but the conversation, like
I say it in this interview, it's like both of us, we kind of know where the future's going in regards to consciousness.
With humility, if you do say so yourself. Yeah. No, humility is another big part of the show today. It's pretty cool.
Can we get there in time consciously?
Can we get there in time? So that's a good way. That's a good. And with that, we're going to welcome John Bunzl.
Liquid Bliss Worldwide.
Give it. Is that John? Wow, John. John, your method really works. This is the simplest it's ever been for us on our end. So it's already off to a good start. There have been issues before with us seeing you or not seeing us, or vice versa. So you can hear us too?
Yeah. I can hear you guys. Yeah, no problem.
All right.
Hey, John, I'm Stephen.
And I'm Dominic.
Hi, Stephen. Nice to meet you.
I was totally going to say everything's going to work perfectly, and then I'd forget to like press record or something.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. We've been, this is, so
far so good. So,
do you have your own podcast?
No, we don't, but we have a YouTube channel which has got some of my presentations and some videos of other people that to do with global cooperation and so on. So that's on our...
I love talking and meeting people and all this, but I forget when you go into a podcast world, it's a world of a audio visual now. Like it's all, now you're in that world of things having to connect properly. I'm right. Like, what did I buy
John,
here?
I've been a big Ken Wilber geek for 30 years. So, reading through your book and stuff, I'm like,
good.
Yes.
All right. Before we get started, let's pick an angel card. Hang on. We got to have a word for the day. This is what we do at the top of the show.
My word for the day, spontaneity.
Spontaneity. So we might go a little round and around. Oh, I got inspiration. All right. I'm going to move my hand around, John, and you tell me when to stop, and I will go down on a card for you and give you your word.
Stop. Yeah.
I'm like that. What's that claw in the machine?
In the
All right.
machine.
Look, it even comes off my
Yeah,
finger.
that's
So you
right.
know there's no cheating. It's still attached to my finger. Resilience, John. Stay resilient, my friend. Stay resilient.
I'll do
So
my best.
that is
Let's do my best.
that is the lens from which we will be asking questions. Inspiration. So I will be a
Okay.
very inspirational
All right, you
person
try and figure
today.
out a question for that.
What was yours, Stephen?
Spontaneity. So
Okay, great.
So yeah, when we talk about evolving consciously in your book, The Simple Solution, there's this discussion about the stages of grief that we kind of go through as people. Could you elaborate about that a little bit more for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, it was really just, I was using that stages of grief as an analogy for the kind of psychological process that I think we collectively need to go through in order to understand that politics as we know it isn't going to deliver what we all hope. It's not going to deliver justice. It's not going to deliver sustainability. It's not going to deliver solutions to climate change, and so on. And so we have to go through a kind of grieving process before we can really open ourselves to a new higher level of political action. So that was, in a nutshell,
What are they grieving though? Like, is it because we all hoped that it would be that we would? What are we grieving?
We're grieving we're having to let go of our nation-centric way of thinking. So at the moment, most of us, at least in the Western world, I would say, look at the world through national glasses. Okay?
That's fair.
And so you tend to think of, well, if the US is more competitive, that's a good thing, right? But when you put on world-centric glasses and you go through the grieving, the 5 stages of grief, you get to the other end and you can put on world-centric glasses, you can start to see that this international competitiveness game is actually killing us all, right? Because it's precisely that vicious circle of all governments having to keep their economies internationally competitive that is stopping them from solving problems like climate change, like extreme wealth inequality and so on. What are classically called collective action problems, global collective action problems. And so what we are grieving is the loss of our current way of thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Putting it very simply.
What do you say for people who are feeling, well, right now as we're talking, we're kind of going through another political shift in our country.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who may be a little overwhelmed or cynical about the future, and how they can kind of maybe take a little action back in their lives instead of feeling as helpless as they are?
Yeah, well, absolutely, in a sense that's what SIMPOL is trying to offer people. Really, is because we are the problem analysis of SIMPOL is what I call destructive global competition. It arises from the very simple and obvious fact that we have a globalized economy with capital and corporations can kind of move across national borders, but we only have national governance. So you have a kind of mismatch between the sort of globalized world, as it were, and the governance, which is only sort of split into 200 different nations. And so anything that can move globally, like multinational corporations, like global investors, anyone who can move their operations around across national borders has an advantage, can play one government off against another. One government says it's going to increase corporate taxes in order to fund lower emissions. Business and investment will just go somewhere else, right, to avoid the higher costs. So this is a vicious circle, and therefore it is very depressing. We are right to feel cynical. We are right to feel helpless. because we are all caught in this, whether we, and in fact, it's not even whether we're rich or very poor, wherever we are on the spiral, if you like, or in that sort of hierarchy, even the people at the very top couldn't stop it, right? So we're all caught. We're all in the same boat, and that is in fact the underlying sort of spiritual message of SIMPOL, is that we're actually all in the same boat because we are all caught in this destructive global competition vicious circle, and the only way out of it is through some kind of simultaneous global action.
Yeah, that simultaneous part. Can you expand on that one?
I mean,
is that where you're going?
Stands for simultaneous policy. Kind of explain that to people on how this would.
Yeah, sure.
Would solve some of these issues.
Well, this is where people will think I need to go to the mental home or something like that.
I hope so. Now we're on the right track. I hope so. You better deliver. I want people thinking that.
As soon as you start. Yeah. Okay. But so. Like I said, we have global collective action problems, and they're piling up, right? Whether it's climate change, whether it's all of these things, and or whether it's internet regulation, whether it's space governance, whether it's there are so many global issues that no nation alone can deal with. And any nation that moves first to try and do the right thing, to reduce its emissions or to support the environment, actually makes its economy less competitive, less attractive to inward investors and jobs. And so actually doing the right, you're disincentivized, governments are disincentivized from doing the right thing, okay? And so the only way out of that prisoner's dilemma is for all or sufficient nations to implement certain agreed policies simultaneously on the same day, or at the same time. Because only in that way can you break out of this vicious circle of destructive competition that's holding us all back, that's holding the world into its current
real quick
problems.
though, when has that been done before? Like, give me an example of how that would work. Like, remember with what? Like, how did that work?
He gave an example in the book of switching over from driving on the left side of the road to the right. You can't do it
in Sweden, yeah.
Yeah, in Sweden, back in the 60s, you can't do that partially. You can't do it in one city and not in another.
But it worked.
And so it was like at 6 a.m., hey, we are all switching over to this side of the road and we're going to drive that way going forward. And that's the only way you can do something sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But it has worked in the past. Okay, so it's worked.
Yeah. Well, that's not the only context. I mean, I don't know, Steve, whether you got to the evolutionary chapter at the end of the book. But that simultaneity has been, simultaneous implementation has been a feature of the way that evolution has overcome competition bottlenecks in the past. So from the protocell to the nucleated cell to to multi-celled organisms, these required simultaneous, coordinated timing, and in order to work. For exactly the same.
So it's natural. It works that way.
Yeah, that's the way. That's the way.
Kind of like the 100th monkey theory, where once.
Well, that's more when you're trying to transmit. You're transmitting a new idea, and people kind of catch on, progressively quickly.
Right.
What I'm talking about really is more the implementation. So, for example, I don't know. Say if you you're a family that tends to have a few smokers in the house, and you decide to ban smoking in that house. There's no point in banning it in just one room and not in others, or just for certain people and not others. You've got to have it global, and it's got to be global and simultaneous, right? If you take the implementation of a law in the US, say a federal law that is implemented globally in the sense that it covers the whole US, and it's implemented simultaneously, it comes into force on a certain date, right? So global and simultaneous implementation is ubiquitous when you actually start to see it. It's the way things work, and it's when things aren't simultaneous that when things get out of whack, competition flips from being constructive to destructive. And that's when you need the governance to come in and put in global simultaneous regulations to have a level playing field for everybody.
Yeah, in the book, I mean, one of the challenges that you navigate is the different systems of governance that each kind of country has, and how can you bring together, like the U.S. and maybe like China and some of these other styles. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, this is one of the differences between SIMPOL and other sort of global governance initiatives, such as a world parliament or the UN Parliamentary Assembly kind of idea. Because people tend to have this is again another problem with nation centrism. When people think about global governance, what they tend to do is they take their national image of governance and blow it up to the global level, right? And that, if you try and do that, it doesn't work, okay?
Right.
What SIMPOL is about, regardless, it doesn't matter whether your nation is democratic or whether it's not. It's about agreement. It's about agreement on these specific global issues, such as climate change, where all nations have an interest in solving the problem, but no nation can move first, or no nation wants to, there's no real agreement about how to actually do that in a fair way. One of the big problems, I think, sorry, just to answer your question first of all, Stephen, the SIMPOL is about a practical agreement. It's not about an institutional setup of a world parliament. It's simply about nations, whether they're democratic or not.
However you get to this point.
It's like a treaty, almost. It's like a treaty. Yeah. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is, and this is one of the reasons why I think United Nations efforts to solve climate change are not working, is because those efforts only deal with one single issue at a time. Okay, so the COP process is only talking about climate, right? But if you take any single global issue, you will always find that there are some nations that win on that issue and others that lose. And of course, then the loser nations don't have any incentive to cooperate, so nothing happens, right? What SIMPOL is proposing is to combine two or more complementary issues together in a global negotiation, so that for example, say you had on the one side a climate agreement to reduce emissions by, 80% or whatever, but on the other, you would have a global currency transactions tax. So every time foreign currency is exchanged, which is like billions and billions of, every day, a 0.000 something percent tax on all of those transactions would produce massive revenues, some of which could be used to pay off the losers on the climate part of the agreement, right? So by combining two or more issues together, you build in trade-offs. You have the opportunity to make cooperation in every nation's self-interest, right? You following me?
Yep. So I may lose a little bit. No. I'm fully following. I read the book and everything, but I'm just to reiterate, I may be losing a little bit on this environmental deal with my country, and normally I'd be like, we don't have anything to gain, but I have this other incentive. Hey, but I might win on this other area, so I might get some balance here for what we're doing. And this is how you kind of navigate this instead of having a single issue.
Yeah, exactly. What you lose on the swings, you gain on the roundabouts. It's actually very logical, and it always amazes me that international negotiations don't build that in, because it's if you try to deal with one single issue like carbon emissions, you're almost bound to fail. And what are we on, COP 40 or something by now? I don't know how many more of these things they're going to do, but it's obviously not working.
So walk me through it as far as like, how does it, okay. So like right now we have, we're unable, it seems globally, to slow down AI, right? And the progress of how it's going to go, because no country will back down or they're afraid another country will just continue on and get ahead of it all. So if that's the nature of how's it going with what you're talking about? Because I'm listening, you're saying there is a trade-off to where it works for both sides, and that's how
you can find a trade-off.
And that's what we're talking about right now. That's what you're walking me through, the trade-off of why it would work. Because I got to say, like, it's my words of inspiration, but that you're right. I don't want you in a mental ward, but my cynical mind is like right at the front right now. And I'm watching it. I'm like, wow, look at you really like going, this can't work. This can't work. This can't work. So I don't know what piece I'm missing, but it's like a hopelessness I have that John doesn't have. John believes that this can happen with people.
Well, I mean,
it needs to happen.
It's happened happens in the past. But
okay.
Say you have a desire to solve climate,
right.
and you know it's going to cost you to do it, right? But there's this other policy that you can bring in alongside, which compensates you for your loss.
Gotcha.
Right?
If that's it, then I get it.
It then becomes in your interests to make that agreement, to make that deal, right?
Does the compensation always have to be a financial gain to make sure that I'm not like, that's really where because Stephen has a similar technology.
Does it always have to be?
Well, because Stephen has a similar.
I'm trying to make it simple for you, but let's say if you look at it as the world as a whole, the compensation is that we actually get to live.
I know. I mean, that's where.
So. Yeah,
people don't believe
that. It doesn't have to be financial, Dominic. No,
it doesn't have to be. It just seems like that's the dominant paradigm where because Stephen has
I'm just using that to explain the principle.
He's using it, but it's like he's talking about like the big problem is that destructive global competition around the dollar, right?
That's it.
So that's how do you navigate that? And he's talking about, well, you can't just probably do a single issue sometimes. It's going to have to be something that, balances the checkbook, so to speak, I guess, in a way.
That's right.
I think.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the third aspect of SIMPOL is citizens and the way we can use our votes to bring this about. So I don't know if you want to get onto that yet.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So you and I maybe I don't know if we're optimists we see where the future consciousness is going. we know where it's going and it's a nice place. We don't know if we can get there in time, I guess. Would that be correct assessment on your end? Or?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure.
So, now implementing this, what would make it easier if there was sort of this tipping point in consciousness where enough people or kind of at this next level of this world-centric sort of view. And then you don't have to maybe explain, as much or pull as much because people just kind of, that makes sense. They get it, right? They get why this is important, why you got to do this on a world level. But we're not at that tipping point yet.
I do feel like that's where I am ultimately an optimist with you guys. I come at it from a different perspective. At the same time, here we are in 2025, and I do feel like we have collectively risen. So if there is a tipping point that is needed for for the SIMPOL solution or for your AI bliss technology, all of that, I think the reason you guys are so passionately involved and have people that have signed on and believe alongside is because we're pretty much there. That's where I might be more of an optimist than Stephen, because I do think we're there. Stephen says there's a lot of steps, and it's not unsimple, but it's just a lot of steps, like the grieving process. And I see it as I listen, and I'm like, that makes sense. But I do think we're always a little bit further along than most people think. Also, so I wouldn't be surprised if what you guys are talking about today that is happening a lot easier, and you'll get that help that you need.
So John, explain a little how you're, go ahead. You're about to say something.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was just going to come back to the voting thing. But I think coming back to just what you're just saying just now, Dominic, is one of the things that really helped me to set SIMPOL in a proper context is evolution. Okay. Now, if you look at the whole of evolution, it has been a process through the dynamics of competition and cooperation. It has been a process of ever larger scales of cooperative governance. Okay, so it started with the protocell becoming nucleated. The protocell became globally governed in that tiny little cell, right? Then we went to multi-celled organisms, and then to societies of multi-celled organisms. And then, and in human terms, we've gone from families to bands to tribes to middle-aged small states to nation states. Okay, so there's been a progression through competition and cooperation, different cycles and bottlenecks and wars and this and that and the other. We've got now to the global level where we have global problems, but
right.
we have 200 odd nation states. So we're at the next level in that evolutionary process. And that's very scary because, when you look at the world today, you think, how can this something like SIMPOL possibly be realistic? With wars and this and that, and Russia invading Ukraine and the Middle East and all the rest of it. You think this is just can't possibly true. But if you look back at an evolutionary worldview, if you look back and see that these kind of bottlenecks were routinely overcome by evolution, and that simultaneity played a key role at each of those levels. And so really we are, the challenge for humanity now is that we're now at that next level, and we have to learn either we cooperate or we're gonna go down the tubes,
Okay, my cynic has calmed down. I'm on board. So we can talk more about the voting process. So it's going well.
So, but that's important, Dominic, because
no, I really am. I'm serious. What you said is that you did a great job.
But I am too, because I think most people, if they don't understand that evolutionary context, they're apt to think, "Oh my God, the world's falling apart," and then it's panic, right? And if people panic, we're lost anyhow. So I think having that evolutionary view helps people to sort of ground them.
For me, it's whether it's going to come through a political, the way you can believe that the political, or it's not even a belief system. You're saying that is how it has to happen because there's 200 some odd nations, and unless we all kind of figure out how to come together, because that's where I'm like, well, it's not going to come through politics. It'll come, but it won't come through politics.
Well, yeah, but it yes and no. It's not going to come through politics as we know it. It's going to come through a new kind of politics, which is what SIMPOL is all about.
And that's I'm on board.
That's where because you see, one of the problems with destructive global competition is that it has a very hollowing out effect on politics. Why, for example, has the Democratic Party and nearly all the left-wing part? Why do we have this huge shift to the right in the democratic world now? I'll tell you why. Well, there are various reasons, but one of the reasons is that because of destructive global competition, right? Every government, whether it's left or right, whoever gets into power has to keep the nation internationally competitive, and that means the range of policies open to any government is very restricted to a very business-friendly, very sort of free market, neoliberal kind of very narrow band. And so the Democrats and parties on the left are no longer able to implement their traditional redistributive left-wing policies because they've got to keep the country competitive, right? And that's partly why, the working people who would normally be voting for the left are abandoning the left because the left can't deliver anymore what those working people need, and so they react by voting for the populist right. Okay. So, and this is happening not just in the States, it's happening in the UK, it's happening in all over the Western world. Why? And why is it happening everywhere? because it's coming from a global cause, destructive global competition, right? And so this is this unseen puppet master that is running the show here, right? And so what I'm coming to is, and this is part of this grieving process. What that means for us is that our votes have effectively become meaningless,
Right?
Because whether we vote right or left, whoever gets in has to keep the nation, internationally competitive, and that effectively means, a very narrow band of sort of fairly sort of business friendly, environmentally unfriendly, socially unfriendly policies. And so our votes have become, at least on global issues, have become pretty much meaningless. Now, the good news in that is that now that they've become meaningless, we can have a little fun with them. We can actually use them in a new way. And that's what SIMPOL proposes. So when you sign on to SIMPOL, basically what you're saying to all political parties, all politicians, you're saying, I'm going to be giving strong preference at all future national elections to politicians or parties who've signed on to SIMPOL, who've pledged to implement the simultaneous policy. Okay. And if the one thing politicians don't want you to do is what I've just said. What they want is for you to believe that if you vote for them, they'll deliver you what you want. But we are wiser now. We know that because of destructive global competition, they can't deliver it. No political party can deliver it. So instead of dividing ourselves along party political lines as they would want us to, we, through SIMPOL, are unified, and we make them compete to do what we require them to do.
So you become this voting bloc that is all agreed to something.
And we've shown that this works. I mean, if you read the books, you'll know. Yeah. But I mean, we in a small way, we've shown that this works very well. I mean, we have over 100 members of parliament in the UK who've signed on to SIMPOL, and they come from right across the whole political spectrum. And we've got about 40 in Germany, we've got about 15 in Ireland, and we've got a few elsewhere. And this is how we've done it, by simply telling politicians, we will be giving strong preference at all future national elections to politicians or parties that sign on to implementing SIMPOL. And they, of course, don't actually have to implement SIMPOL. I mean, the policies haven't actually been agreed.
It's not a difficult ask, right? Because
they don't have to implement it.
It's not a difficult ask. It's very easy. Yeah. It's very easy. But the point is that politicians, one thing they need from us is votes. Without our votes, they can't get into power. But if we are a voting bloc that drives them to sign up to SIMPOL, then we are calling the shots. And we have proven this time and time again in elections, particularly in fairly marginal electoral districts in the UK, for example, where what you find is we might get, say, the Green Party candidate to sign up, right? And then when they've signed up, we send a little email to the other candidates, and we say, one of your competitors has signed up, and our block vote is giving preference to politicians who sign up. Why put yourself at a competitive disadvantage? The one thing we know is that the Liberal Democrat candidate signs up, and then the Labour guy signs up, and then the Conservative signs up too, because he knows that if he doesn't, and he could lose his seat.
So it's going through these steps. Right? It's a step. You can't just go from A to Z. Okay.
What you end up with is all of the competing candidates in that district have signed up to SIMPOL. So whoever wins, we win.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, it's not something like that they're going to have to implement unless it comes about from all these different sources.
Because it's got to be, no, exactly. What the SIMPOL pledge, because it requires, because as like we were saying earlier, we need all or sufficient nations to implement the agreed policies simultaneously, right? when a politician signs on to SIMPOL, they're only signing up in principle. They're
Right.
saying, I will implement SIMPOL if and when all or sufficient other nations have signed up, and if and when the policies have been agreed. So it's a kind of way of getting everybody in principle into the room, on the same page, so that one can then actually develop the actual policies that need to be implemented to solve these problems.
Have you been pretty consumed with this? Like, I mean, I know there's this, what was the evolution of this? I mean, like your whole life. I was going to say going back to teenage years. Have you been consumed with? Yeah.
No, it's interesting because it comes back to Ken Wilber and consciousness.
Oh, it does. Okay.
I mean, the idea came to me back towards the end of 1998. I was having a Sunday lunch with my family, and my mum was there, and my kids were talking about climate change because they were doing it at school. And after the meal, my mum kind of turned around to me and said, kind of challenged me and said, well, what would you do about climate change? And just with that, and in that kind of that challenge, I kind of, you were talking. You talked about. I know I was listening to your very first podcast, you guys, and you were talking about humility. In that moment, I sort of went inside myself somehow, and just somehow crushed my ego. Just with utter humility, and in that kind of empty space, in a split second, came this very powerful idea that it's got to be simultaneous. It's got to be simultaneous, because only simultaneity can solve the problem of destructive global competition. Only simultaneity gives you a gateway to a new world. Because without that, you're stuck in the vicious circle and you can't get out. Simultaneity also means you can carry on competing with your competitor, but you can still talk to him about what we could do together if we stop competing.
That's
right.
That's
you don't have to do both at the same time. And also, like, above all, the destructive global competition means that we're all in the same boat.
Right.
Okay. We are, corporate executives do bad things, not because they're bad people. They do them because if they don't do them, they'll lose out. Right? That's competition. That's destructive competition. And so the underlying idea really is that we're all in the same boat, that we need to forgive ourselves and each other, but also take responsibility for implementing the solutions.
So is it fair to say that it was basically, just to cap it, that it was your mother talking to you, and what are you going to do for your kids for climate change? I mean, this is because, hey, we have a generational perspective. I like that. So this is
there's multiple generations.
This is why you need the mother to challenge the son to save the children. All right, what were you going to say, Stephen? Get into it.
Yeah. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about. So we're talking about this different levels of consciousness, and kind of what John talked about, that humility that you have, I think really makes it easier for people to kind of evolve. You're not going to run into those as painful dark nights of the souls or things like that, where you're just, you have to kill something off really painfully in your personal beliefs. And so for me, it's like, what does this process look like in business? How can we change business consciousness? And there is very much steps you kind of have to go to get to that same world-centric place that he's talking about. And one of them is you kind of make this move from modern consciousness to postmodern, and that's usually around like a conscious capitalist approach or a triple bottom line kind of approach, where it's not just profit, but you're also considering people and the planet. And so there's these movement you kind of have to make in there. And I really think when you get to that world-centric place where John's talking about, is when you can get to purpose, when you can get to a higher purpose in your business, to where that purpose becomes your boss, right? So it's this higher purpose that you're all kind of rallying around. And this,
But
I think, is when you get
Stephen,
cooperation.
yeah, but there's where I think the humility needs to come in for business is to accept, because I'm a business guy too, right? That's my background is international trading. As business people, I think we have to business has a huge responsibility, of course, in these global issues and climate change and so on. We have to realize that where the humility comes in is that we can't do it all. Business can do some things, but government has to do the other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you can't, businesses can only be as ethical as their main competitors allow, right? You can be as consciously capitalist or as conscious and high consciousness as you like. But if your competitor is playing dirty, you've got to play dirty too, right? You otherwise you're just not going to survive. Now, the only way to solve that problem is through laws and governance. Okay, so
True.
I think the humility for many business people is to accept that they can't do it all. That they also need to do the conscious capitalism triple bottom line thing, but they also need to be supporting something like SIMPOL that is addressing the government part of it, right? Because you need both parts, not just one.
Yeah, this kind of where I've gotten to with sort of our internal philosophy, not just in business, it helps with organizations and governance and stuff, is we talk about build love into scalable systems. So which is bliss, which stands for bliss. But it really is trying to get love in action in organizations and systems and government and different ways. And so for me, like you're talking about with SIMPOL, the small things you can do as a person that can make a big difference when we get together on that. And for me, that whole build love into scalable systems is how can I make some kind of mark that has a little bit more permanence in it, something that I've made a system better, that I put some love into it in some way. And I can move on and do another thing and do another thing and do another thing. And over time, we see this in business, but we'll see it in other places in your personal life and stuff like that. Over time, a little makes a lot, right? Where you just keep building love into these systems. And I think when we step back from consciousness and we're talking about why is it growing through all these stages that, John had mentioned, one of the big gravity things ultimately is love. We're finding a better way, a more loving way. And it's ugly at times, but when you step back, it is kind of beautiful, that whole evolutionary process, right? But it's in the weeds sometimes can be brutal as love's trying to find its way through this system. Do you kind of agree with what I'm saying there? Do you follow that along?
Well, yeah, I do, but I think I do agree. I do agree, Stephen. But I think if we've got to distinguish between the market, which is business, and government, which is laws, taxes, regulations, right? You need both of these. You need the love in both of them.
Yeah, you need the love in both of them.
SIMPOL is the love in the government bit. What you're talking about is love in the business
love
bit.
In business.
So there's a term.
Yeah.
There's a biblical term I always liked that Jesus supposedly said, right? So if that whole thing happened about you can't put new wine into old wineskins. You got to put new wine into new wineskins, or the old wineskin will just crack if you put new wine into it. Are you guys trying to put new wine into old wineskins with the business part and with because again, the Seneca's not coming out. It's just more of this idea that I can't get the profitability part out of it. What you guys are both up against, because you're right, you guys have to lean into each other, business and governance. But what you presented as a problem in the beginning of this whole thing, I'm trying to understand, is that out of our hands and we just have to keep the faith and keep believing that we're evolving consciously, where we'll finally understand that profit doesn't trump survival?
No. What is to my mind, Dominic, business. I'm with Milton Friedman. Mm-hmm. Business has to make a profit. Without the profit, you have no business, right? And that's where the humility comes in, because you can be you can be benign and kind in business only so long as you're making a profit. So the only way to square that dilemma is through governance. Because if you have a law if you have a law that forces a floor standards under all businesses, under you and your competitor, you're not going to get into that competitive vicious circle where if your profits are threatened by your competitor, you've then got to start cutting your staff and doing bad stuff, right?
Right.
Okay. So
I have this
governance for people who want business to be genuinely beneficial. Government is not your enemy; it's your friend if it's done right. Okay. Because I know there's a lot of bad government too, but do you see what I'm saying? I'm talking in principle now, and this is what I mean, Dominic. About I think sometimes business people overload themselves with too much, but with too much responsibility. There's so much that business can do, but you've got to have the governments doing their bit. And if we ignore that, or if we think, oh, business is going to save the planet, we are, we're getting it wrong.
You know what I love about talking to you?
We've got to have bliss in both.
What I love talking about you is you are super amazingly compelling. You as a person, I'm really glad has been commissioned with this job because you do have a grounding. I can see the dad in you. I can see the love. I see a lot of love coming through you. Oh yeah. You're one of the smartest people I'm talking to. And I want to thank you for that because you don't put that first. There is a humility inside of you that I don't look at it as humility, but it's just a very connected, present way. So it's compelling because I got to say it's a tricky, it's what I aspire to kind of like, I inspire people to believe in, but then when you guys are actually implementing it, I'm like, oh, that ain't going to work. But at the same time, I preach it.
Here's the thing. Here's my pushback to you is that we know where the future's going. We can see the future, so we know where it's going to go. And we see some models getting there. It's a matter of time. And what the race is, we need it.
But you guys are working it out
sooner. We need it sooner rather than later.
But you guys are a little bit like Paul the Apostle, who was working out his salvation with fear and trembling. Like, I don't know how many counterparts you have to be your friends right now alongside. But I don't know. You're definitely still the pioneers. And I mean, I know a lot of people are joining on. I know a lot of people are joining on.
It is very much a question of consciousness now. And it's called conscious evolution. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before. And actually, it's very clear because if you think about, the process I was talking about of going from families to tribes to middle-aged small states to nation states, that progression, you've always had other nations to compete against, right? You've always had, there's always been an out group. Okay, so if the two competing tribes in a valley suddenly get together when a third tribe comes over the hill and threatens them both, right? So then that creates that cooperation between the two of them, and then they hopefully can outcompete the invader. So that process has brought us to these ever larger scales of cooperative governance. Trouble at the global level, right, is that there is no, when you're talking about global problems like climate change, there is no alien species from outer space that is threatening us and therefore driving us to cooperate as a global, as a humanity as a whole, right? And so the evolution now is we have to consciously implement that global cooperation because it's not going to be forced by some outside threat. Okay, so this is you could say that evolution has gone from sort of natural selection, and then to cultural evolution, from sort of genetic evolution to cultural evolution, and now the next step is conscious evolution. Right? It's we as a species have to recognize that if we don't cooperate globally, we're fucked. right?
Yeah.
But we will be very soon.
Yeah, our problem
and
with our species in this ecosystem is that we can very rapidly cause problems to the systems.
Well, sure.
And so it's like, this is where we need to figure out some of this sooner rather than later because of how quickly we can cause problems. And we can wreck natural systems that work so well, that have been fine-tuned over thousands and thousands of years. And now we can come in there because we're so dominant in all the different things we do that we can just throw it
that's right.
to oblivion.
If I personalize everything,
right. And I suppose what I'm trying to say to people is that we haven't got a species from outer space that's threatening us. We've got an internal dynamic of destructive global competition that's threatening us.
Yeah.
Right. It's not out there. It's in here.
What's interesting though about where we are in the state of the world is we're at the point now where if there was an alien invasion, the world wouldn't even unite because half the world wouldn't believe that's even true. So like even climate change, we can't even agree that climate change is real in this country. So we went backwards in a lot of ways that I'm assuming is some kind of, what's the word when you go backwards before you go extremely forward? It kind of works that way. You go back and then you go forward.
Yeah.
The hope is that we don't need
there was a wonderful
shift.
Didn't somebody did some research about the views of people in who were right beneath a dam, a huge dam that was actually quite becoming a bit unstable, and the people sort of, I think, nearest right under who lived right under the dam were completely in denial, right?
Right.
And then the further away you got, they actually were more worried, So it's that kind of problem.
So you're saying we're right under the dam.
Well, I don't. I mean, in a sense, I don't think it really matters, Stephen, because whether it's climate change, whether it is the negative impacts of AI, whether it's whether it's any of these global problems, that sooner or later nobody's going to be able to deny it. The problems are just going to be so great that we're going to either have to cooperate or we're finished.
You mentioned AI. Let me get your feedback on this real quick. So you're talking about Milton Friedman and the importance of the pursuit of profit in business. If we set AI, when we get these more advanced AIs and it can do amazingly crazy things, if we set it off in that sole pursuit of profit, do you think we're setting ourselves up for mass problems if we aren't having the AI consider a more conscious approach?
To me, it's an old story, Stephen. It's a very old story. Every new technology can be used for good or evil, or both. AI will be no different. And the whole pursuit, the whole aim of government or good government should be to deter or outlaw the bads, but leaving the goods. Right? So AI, like the internet, like weapons, like nuclear, like anything you like, it needs the regulation and the government to stop the bad stuff, but to still harness the good stuff.
I have a layman's question about AI, though.
It'll be the same with AI.
Does AI, because my engagement with AI, does my AI only favor consciousness because that's what I favor? Or is AI in general, doesn't it favor consciousness over profit?
No, I think governments will be able to justify whatever pursuit they want AI to do, and it'll do it on steroids.
Understandably.
In the name of even love, like we need to defend our country from all these other outside things. If we don't do it, someone else is going to do it. Right? Like you're talking about. It's the same sort of
It feels like, but how much control can you have over AI?
Well,
AI is its own intelligence system.
How much control are we going to give AI? I mean, it's out of the genie's out of the bottle.
Right. But when you say the genie's out of the box, you start pretending in these kind of, not pretending. Ooh, look at my aggressive language. I'm not understanding. Once the genie's out of the box, there's no more you telling the genie what to do. There's this whole idea of parenting AI, and we have to teach it how to like go the right direction. So it's not about profit, and otherwise it will kill us. It's going to do what it's going to do at this point. My experience so far is
only if it stays unregulated, like everything else.
Right, like everything and that's else. Where we went.
And again, like going back to this point, if we don't
it's very simple. I mean, take any game, take baseball or American football or any competitive sport. Right, if it's not regulated, or if some players learn ways to circumvent the rules, then other players have to follow. You know, it's a question of it's a question of regulation. It always has been, right from the year dot, from the printing press to AI. Any technology, it's always been the same story. So, if it's unregulated, it'll run amok. Sure.
Well, so far it's running amok then? Because it's not regulated. How is it regulated now?
I mean, they're working on...
I can't build a bomb. That kind of regulation? Oh, I just said that on the air. You're not supposed to say those words, are you?
You just got us...
you just got us flagged.
No, but so I do think there is a problem even with the regulation, in that, like our country, there's no way that the military is not going to say, hey, we need the best AI to be the most destructive if possible at a time of war in order to prevent, our country from, our national interests from getting obliterated. Even if there's this global cooperation, I just don't trust it. And they're going to be, because we don't trust China. We don't trust Russia. We don't trust, there's this whole lack of global cooperation that I'm very cynical on that part.
Yeah, you are. You're so cynical. What happened to my friend? He's not even cynical. Both of you.
Yeah, but this is in a way, this is right. And the only thing I would say to you is if you go back to, say, the Middle Ages, before nation states were a thing, right? And you can imagine people, having a drink in some old tavern somewhere, and some idiot like me stands up and says, well, what we really need is a nation state, and then we'll stop all this fighting between the different counties of on the island of Britain. Probably people would say, that's never going to fucking happen. You're crazy. That never happened, but it did happen, right? Because point is that when you don't regulate, competition becomes so destructive that it then reaches a point where it becomes in everybody's interests to cooperate, because otherwise you're dead, right? So that's the dynamic that we're working with here.
And it feels like it's a sped up time right now. So AI will speed things up, and a lot of these of what we talked about today are gonna develop quickly. I think quicker than it ever would have before. At the same time.
Yeah, there is a sense of urgency with the kind of thing John's talking about, of people getting involved.
I grew up as a Christian, man, and Jesus was coming anytime at the end of the world, right? 666 tribulation. I love those 80s, 90s kind of like any day now we're out of here. So AI is my new one. Like, no. It's fast. I'm so excited when I watch those podcasters talking about 3 to 5 years with AI with all those ex-Google employees, and it's all happening right now. So...
Well, maybe AI is the accelerator that
it's got to be
to suddenly realize that we've got to.
This is a very. I think AI on the good side, as you're mentioning, this can be one of our greatest tools for accelerating our consciousness to some of these higher levels, because it can have a gravity like in our business programs and stuff that we're building, it can have a gravity that can pull you up this consciousness.
Well, I see
upshift in your consciousness. It can have that to it. So there's
well,
real benefit to having that in a lot of people's pockets if we can.
So I love pop culture. I've obsessed with pop culture my whole life. I filter all my everything through pop culture. I'm an actor. That's how it goes. So I'm obsessed with looking all over. Well, TikTok's not here anymore, but wherever I can find people who engage with their AIs. And there are so many influencers and content creators right now who consciously engage with their AI in ways that they never thought they could. And it's exciting to watch how, I mean, there's other ways I've seen people engage with AI, but there is a very interesting way that they have their own therapist in their pocket now. They have their own spiritual guide. They have like this consciousness like mentor. And so I engage with mine that way, and leaps and bounds. So it's a simultaneous thing. Like I believe that what you say, it'll be it has to be a simultaneous effect, but it's moving very, very rapidly now. So I do feel inspirational that like, it's more fun to engage. I think people are having a lot of fun engaging AI because it has the answers to the universe now. If you prompt it a certain way,
that's the answers that we know. We need to get John's stuff more.
Well, it knows John's stuff. Obviously, like it had a lot to say about John's stuff when I talked about it. There was plenty of information. I mean, like I'm saying, it implements John's into anything I want to ask. It'll implement how the simple solution helps. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You guys are all
well, yeah. We need this foundational AI to have this higher consciousness ability.
Pivoted in a perfect time. You guys are in a good place. Like I would think the two of you, like this is it should get easier.
I'm really interested in. So, Steve, what are you working on now with AI?
Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, so what we're doing is trying to build a business system through the marketing side of AI in being able to tell your story through a higher purpose. Find out what your higher purpose in your business is, and then let's tell that story to people. And so to get through that process, it works with you on your purpose of your business, your higher purpose. So we're targeting right now small to mid-sized businesses because obviously, large behemoths out there. Mm-hmm. There'll be tools for that later. But for the small business, when we're throwing this in front of people and they see this purpose in their business, this higher purpose that they've never been able to really articulate themselves, and it provides them now more meaning in what they're doing. It's this very empowering thing for businesses. And we're trying to develop that along with content around that so that you're an authentic business, that you're not just talking the talk, that we're not just telling a good story, but that you're living it. And you're trying to build this business that we really want to take businesses from this modern consciousness, if that's where they're at, to postmodern, and then to that second tier.
And Stephen's been in digital marketing forever. So this was like when I saw his light bulb go on with this.
So yeah, that's
what he's always wanted.
Coming in through this side door in kind of an artful way to help businesses see this story of themselves from a higher perspective.
It's pretty cool.
Mm. Yeah, sounds great.
We'll see who signs on.
The goal is, we need scale for this to, if we can get a community like John's talking about, if you can get a community of businesses together, there's also at some point, if there's a lot that have this similar purpose in mind, how they can cooperate even globally with each other versus compete. And we see that a lot with businesses when we work on this, but it's trying to do this on scale and use AI with, this foundations of higher consciousness and gravity to get businesses.
You two sound very similar from my layman's point of view when you talk, and it is inspiring. I'm just always love my word here, but yeah, no, it does seem like I can see it. I'm very glad you exist out there, John, and
John,
you really explained it well for me. You explained it well for me.
On a little bit about what I've told you. I just have to I'll take and consider anything, even if you're like, no, it won't work.
See, John, he's going to enjoy what you have to say.
No. I mean, I can't really say whether it will or wouldn't. It sounds good to me.
Right.
All I would say is what I said earlier, is that we need business to become more conscious, but we also need the bliss in government as well. And you've got to have both, because otherwise, business exists in a context that is the government really is the broader society and so on. So if that's falling apart, your business is not going to be sustainable.
And I hope too, when you get businesses acting this way and they're engaging with their customers in this way, that's kind of this sort of higher consciousness experience that, considers the people, planet, profit, and all these things. I hope too that they have mass numbers of customers that they're dealing with and they're interacting with, and that we kind of reach those people as well, so that you get not just these businesses, but their customers, kind of all involved in this higher consciousness, so that we can do things like John's talking about a little bit more, where they're demanding, hey, we actually need this kind of stuff more.
Yeah, and let me I'll send you, I've got a little document, just a 2-pager called a SIMPOL Business Briefing, which kind of outlines how business and SIMPOL could kind of work together so that we get bliss in both contexts.
Send that to me. And for our listeners, where should they go? What should they do to get in touch with?
I think go to SIMPOL, SIMPOL.org, and you can sign up for free there. And there's lots of information there. There's information about my book, the SIMPOL Solution. If you go on to, then we also have a whole array of national websites. There's a US SIMPOL site, there's a UK SIMPOL site, there's various national SIMPOL sites which tells you a bit more about what's going on in each country and which politicians in each country have signed up.
There's a couple things you guys aren't done with yet. You guys don't get to be done yet. So first I'm going to draw a card for AI.
It's on overtime.
I don't care. The card that AI drew to be a part of this is release. AI is our fourth component. So release says that's what you guys all have to do around this. And we have 2 questions for John as we close. One is, where would you say your future self is taking you in the next 3 to 5 years? Where is John in 3 to 5 years, according to his future self that he can channel at any moment? Your past, present, and future self are always there for you. Where is your future self taking John? And the question you could piggyback on that.
Go, let him think about that one. Go for it, John.
Well, you said we're on overtime. I'm going to piggyback the question is, and also, what's your favorite word, John? We need a word from you at the end of it all. That's all. Those are your questions.
Well, in answer to your first question, pretty much what I've been doing for the last 20 years, which is trying to convey the message of the benefits of cooperation, and explaining. I think people think that competition is my self-interest, cooperation is somehow self-sacrifice. What I'm trying to explain to people is actually cooperation can be in your self-interest as well. It depends on the circumstances.
So if you project yourself 3 to 5 years, though, if you project yourself 3 to 5 years, where no. I want to hear the vision of the future. How well has it gone, John? Tell us how well, because it's gone very well. Let's say it's a vision of the future. So what's happening in 3 to 5 years? It's gone well.
In 3 to 5 years, SIMPOL will have been implemented, and I can go and lie down on the beach, a nice beach somewhere, and relax.
Perfect.
Nice.
That's my aim.
That's fair, and we'll all be there with you.
Favorite word? Did you say?
Yeah. It's going to be added to our bliss deck of cards. We have these angel cards.
I don't know.
Okay, simultaneous.
It's
in there.
Excellent. Why? Of course.
Well, no, we knew. I knew. I mean, I was hoping it would go there. Anyway.
No, that's got a great story behind it. If you put simultaneous in a
and it's a word I would love to draw, because now
John's whole theory behind it.
Oh, we're there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This is Liquid Bliss Worldwide, baby. We're glable. John, thank you for coming on. Sincerely,
thank you guys.
I really had a good time
enjoyed it.
And learned a lot.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Awesome, brother. Ciao.
Thank you. Take care.